Hey everybody, Matt Klaskowski here with a two-part series on selection tips. And I've kind of taught, and I've done some videos and I've done some tutorials on selections before. What you're about to see here is really things that I've learned since I've done those videos. The more I do it, the more little tips and the more things that I come up with that tend to make it easier going forward. So as I find those things out, I always like to share them with everybody. All right, so example number one is what we're going to do, what I used to do. Let me show you what I used to do first. I used to take the quick selection tool, and I'm a big fan of getting a base selection with the quick selection tool, okay? It's not going to be perfect around the edges, but it's going to get us to where we need to go. So I take the quick selection tool, and it works just like a brush, and I'll just make a selection of everything throughout here. And if I zoom in, what you're going to see is that we did pretty good, but if I get really close, you'll see it's not perfect. All right, it's pretty close, and I can take some time and make it perfect. But what we're about to do next really takes care of a lot of that for us, which is we go into this Refine Edge dialog box. So I turn on Refine Edge, and when I start to increase this radius setting, Photoshop starts to look at what I've made a selection of, and it looks for whatever this radius section is. Let's say I set it to 45 pixels. It looks 45 pixels on either side of that selection, and it starts to look for definition. Okay, it starts to look for things that it can use to say, hey, this is how the selection should look versus how you created the selection. Okay, now I know a lot of people say, well, hey, this is great. You know, you shot your photo on a solid background. My photo is a busy background that's a bright white yellowish background that doesn't contrast with her hair. My advice to you is you're screwed. Okay, there's no selection trick I can teach you in the world that's going to help you select wispy hair off of a non-contrasty background, because that's the way selections are created. They're created from some type of contrast. No matter what tool you use, you need contrast in order to be able to make that selection. If you don't have it, you're never going to make the selection. You're never going to get good quality results. So if you want good quality results, you've got to start the right way from the beginning. Okay, and that is to shoot this on I don't care if it's in a studio. If it's outside, make sure she's not in front of anything bright, because you're never going to get a really good selection off of it. Okay, sorry for a little side note there. I know a lot of people say that. I just want to get that out of the way. All right, back to our story at hand. So what we've done here is this little radius setting. It starts to look at the edge, and it starts to decide basically what you want and what you don't want. Well, when you turn on Smart Radius, take a look at what happens here. First off, just look at her clothes. Okay, let me zoom in. Let's just look at her clothes here. Let's look at this part. That's without Smart Radius. See how, take a look at the difference. See how Smart Radius, because this is 250 pixels outside of that edge, so it's going 250 pixels either side. It's bringing in gray without Smart Radius, and it's fading some of her clothes. See that detail, how it goes away? So it's fading some of her clothes too. When I turn Smart Radius on, it snaps to that edge, and it gives me a very clean selection edge. Great. Now, what happens up here in the hair? I turn Smart Radius off, everything looks pretty good. I turn Smart Radius on, I start to bring back more gray and more problems in the hair. So what's the answer to this? What I've started to do is, instead of battling the dialog box to try to get everything selected the right way at once, I'll just select part of it first. So I'm going to take my lasso tool, and I'm just going to hold down Option or Alt, which puts it into subtract mode, and I am going to remove her head, or the selection around her head. I'm going to remove that part of the selection. Okay? And maybe just lasso that back in here. I'm going to remove that part of the selection. Let's forget about that for now. Let's get a selection of what we know is really easy. Come up here to Refine Edge. Come in here, turn on Smart Radius. Crank up my radius setting just a little bit. But that's going to do a really good job of giving me a good selection edge. Remember the sleeve where things weren't perfect? I can come over here. I can show you the original. That's before. And that's after. Before, after. So it definitely does help us refine our edge. It definitely does help us get us a better selection overall of whatever we're working with here. The problem is I can't get the hair in. No sweat. Let's come down here. Let's output this to a layer mask. I'm going to click OK. All right, so we've got the body selected at this point. I'm going to press Command or Control J to duplicate the layer. I'm going to hide the bottom copy, and then I'm just going to take this layer mask on the top, and I'm going to drag it to the trash can, and I'm just going to choose Delete. So let's start over. Let's grab our Quick Selection tool. Now let's work with the head. Okay, I'm not worried about the rest of the photo. Come up here to Refine Edge. Now before, when I crank up, and this is really good for hair, is crank up your radius setting. All right, because take a look at what it does. I mean, it takes care of a lot of the work. It's really creepy. It's a floating head, isn't it? It takes care of a lot of the work for us. All right, just look at the edges. Now, if I turn Smart Radius on, see what it does? It brings back more of that gray background. That's before, and that's after. So while the rest of her benefited from having Smart Radius turned on, her hair benefits from having Smart Radius turned off. Okay, that's why I'm breaking this up into two parts. I know it's still got some edges, and I'll tell you this right now. That's part 2. That's in the second video of the series, where I'll go in and I'll show you how we can get rid of that little gray edge that we tend to see around there. But as far as this is concerned, just getting a good base selection to work off of, this is a big difference. Breaking it up into two parts. So we're going to leave Smart Radius turned off here. You can always grab your edge detection brush here, and sometimes just brushing along the edges will help a little bit too. All right, but when you're done and you're ready, we're going to come down here. We're going to output to a layer mask again. I'm going to click OK. And now, when I turn the bottom layer on, now we've got something better to work with, right? It's not perfect yet, but we've got what we care about. And that's the really important part of this, is we only care about the edges of the hair and the edges of her, because now I can come to this layer mask. I can select my brush tool. And if you look at the layer mask, what's in white? What's in white is what we want to see, right? So I take my brush tool, set the foreground color to white, and just come over here and paint in anything that got missed. Because remember, this stuff's easy. Anything inside of here, I'm not worried about selecting that. I can take care of that in a heartbeat with a brush if anything gets missed. It's the edge of her clothes. It's the edge of her hair. That's the difficult part. So instead of trying to get one tool to do everything for us and to try to get it to basically work right from the start, we're just doing the selection in two passes. And we're letting the settings in the tool work best for what parts of the area, what parts of whatever we're selecting that it tends to work best for. Smart Radius works great when you have a nice hard edge around something, which we did with the clothes. It doesn't work so good when you've got that hair up there with all that detail. Sometimes it works better to turn that off. And then again, when you put those two selections together, and if there's any holes that are missing inside, very easy to come in here and just paint on that layer mask, paint with white, and you can bring those areas back in. Okay, so give that some thought when you're doing your selections. If you have a difficult to select object, look at it, and if it does have a detailed area and a non-detailed area, that might be a really good candidate to break it up into two different parts and make two different selections for it.